Hi guys, it's Mrs. Beggs and I am here to share a couple of multiplication games. I'm having to share them with you on a PowerPoint because I couldn't get anybody to play with me this time. So this isolation stuff is not making me happy. But anyway, I've got a couple of really fun games that I played with myself today that I'm going to share with you. So the first game is called Write the Equations. You need just a couple of different things, or a few materials rather, to play this game. You need a deck of playing cards. You will remove all of the face cards. You'll need 2 players, but if you don't have 2 players, you can actually play this game by yourself. You need a piece of paper and a couple of pens or pencils. The directions for this game are you will want to shuffle the playing cards and lay them face down in a stack. Player 1 should draw out 5 cards from the top of the stack. You set a timer for 1 minute. Player 1 should try to write and solve as many multiplication equations as possible using only the 5 numbers drawn. When player 1 is finished doing this, he or she can count up how many equations they were able to write and solve correctly and write that down. And then player 2 will repeat those same exact steps, drawing the 5 cards from the top of the deck, writing out as many equations as possible and solving them. And then whoever wrote the most equations wins the round. You can play until all of the cards are used or until you want to play a different game. So I'm going to show you just a few pictures of how I played this game. So the very first thing that I did was I took my cards out of the box and I took out all the face cards. So I took out the kings, the queens, the jacks. Okay, I left the aces in because the aces are your 1. I then put the remaining cards face down in one single stack. I got a handy dandy piece of paper and a blue pen for player 1. I drew 5 cards from the top of the stack and I laid them face up. And so as you can see, I had a 9, a 5, an ace, a 10, and a 9. Again, the ace stands for or represents the number 1. I set my timer on my phone, but any timer will work for 1 minute. I then wrote as many problems as I could, as quickly as I could, using those 5 cards. And as you can see, I was able to write and solve 10 complete equations in 1 minute. Then I became player 2. And I did the same thing. I drew the next 5 cards from the top of the stack, or the card stack. These cards were a 2, a 7, 6, 4, and a 3. I set my timer on my phone for 1 minute. And I wrote as many equations and solved as many equations as I could. And as you guys can see, it didn't hurt me any because I got better. So even though I was player one and player two, you can tell how just that extra practice, I went up from 10 equations in 1 minute to 14 equations in 1 minute. So I was able to beat my first score. Now, the second game I played was a game called Race to 500. I didn't actually play it all the way to 500 since it wasn't quite so much fun by myself, but I used the same playing cards and removed the same face cards. This game is more fun with 2 players, and it's for mixed multiplication facts as well. The directions for Race to 500 are: first, you shuffle the playing cards and lay them face down in a stack. Player 1 draws 2 cards from the top of the stack. Player 1 multiplies the 2 numbers and says the product. Player 2 will repeat this same thing. The player with the greater product finds the difference between the 2 products. The player uses the difference for the number of points for that round. The first player to reach 500 wins. If you run out of cards, just reshuffle the deck. This game takes a little longer. So this is how I played it. Again, the very first thing I did was to take the kings, queens, and jacks out of the deck. I then placed the deck face down. For player 1, which was me, I drew the top 2 cards, and they were an 8 and a 10. And so instead of doing it mentally, since I was having to keep track of player 1, player 2, and the difference, I just decided to write it all down on paper. So I went ahead and wrote my 2 factors, 10 and 8, multiplied them, and found the product of 80. I then went to the player 2. Player 2 drew out an ace and a 3. So I wrote that down in a different color. It was a pink. It kind of looks like a reddish pink. But anyway, so I wrote 1 times 3 is 3. And as you can see, player 1 won that round. So the next thing that you do then is you go ahead and you take both products and you find the difference. So you take the 80, the winner, minus the 3. And so the score for player 1 on round 1 would be 77 points. Remember, the way the directions read with this particular game, you are trying to achieve 500 points before your partner does. So player 1 is 77, player 2 at this point is 0. All right, so round 2 came. Again, I just drew 2 cards from the top of the deck, and I drew an ace and a 7. So I wrote that down on my piece of paper as factors 1 and 7. 1 times 7 is 7, 7 being the product. And then I drew 2 more cards for player 2. The 2 cards that I drew were a 2 and an 8. I wrote those 2 down. 2 times 8 is 16. So player 2 won that particular round. So then I took the 16 and I subtracted 7 from it to get 9. So now player 1 still has the 77 points. Player 2 is now 9 points. Round 3, I drew the top 2 cards off the deck, and I drew an 8 and an ace. So I wrote that down again as 1 times 8 or 8 times 1. Either way would be correct. The ace, again, representing the number 1. So my product was 8. I drew 2 more cards for player 2, and I drew a 5 and a 6. So I wrote that down. 5 times 6 is 30. So player 2 won that round as well. And so I subtracted to find the difference. So I took the 30 minus 8, and I got 22 for the difference. So now player 2 has 9 points and 22 more points. Round 3, player 1. I drew a 5 and a 9 from the top of the deck and proceeded to write it down. 5 times 9 is 45. I then went to player 2. I drew a 10 and a 6 from the top of the deck. 10 times 6 is 60. So player 2 won once again. So I took the 60 minus the 45, and the difference is 15. So that's 15 more points toward player 2's score. I went ahead and did a round 5. Round 5, player 1 drew 2 cards from the top of the deck. I drew a 10 and a 7. I wrote it down. Factors 10 and 7. 10 times 7 gives me a product of 70. And then I drew 2 more cards from the top of the deck, and I got a 3 and a 3. So I wrote those 2 down. 3 times 3 is 9. So player 1 won round 5. So I took player 1's product of 70, and I subtracted the 9 from it, and I got 61 points for the difference. So that's 61 more points toward player 1's score. I went ahead and did one more round. So round 6, player 1, I drew 2 more cards off the top of the deck. I drew a 4 and a 6. I wrote it down on my paper. 4 times 6 is 24. Player 2, I drew 2 more cards from the top of the deck. It was 4 and 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. So 24 is greater than 16. So player 1 won round 6. So I took the product 24 and I subtracted 16 from it to get a difference of 8. So the last thing that I went ahead and did, just to kind of show you how you would continue to keep your score. Again, your goal is first one to reach 500 points would be the winner. But since I was playing myself, and I felt like that was enough to kind of show you guys how the game was played, I went ahead and just totaled up the wins for player 1 and the wins for player 2. And as you can see, player 1 won 3 out of the 6 games or rounds, and player 2 won 3 out of the 6. But player 1 was ahead significantly. So I would say player 1 was the winner of this game. So guys, you can go to 500, or if you just have a little bit of time, you can go round by round, or just quit whenever each player has had the same number of turns. So I'm going to end this with, you can play games by yourself, but it's much more fun with a friend. Hashtag, we're all in this together. Hashtag, we're going to make it. Guys, I miss you so badly. I can't wait to be back to normal, you know, as it's going to get for a while, but to be able to share a classroom with you all and just be in your presence again. I hope you're doing well. I miss you dearly, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.